Hey everyone, it's Don with Don's Field of Dreams Cards. Going to show some cards today that I showed earlier this week. I was fortunate enough to be invited by Mike Moynihan to be on his podcast, The Golden Age of Cardboard. And if you have not seen it, I'm going to leave a link down below. Just a ton of fun, and Mike got to know him much better at the National, and we have very common interests. So it was so easy to talk about the subject that we did. And so I'm just going to re-show the cards today. That way you can get a little closer, better view on this angle and less glare. But I'm not really going to talk much about the cards because you can see that in Mike's podcast or hear it. But basically what we did was we picked a Hall of Famer that was overshadowed by another Hall of Famer, and many of these guys would have been greats on their own team had it not been for the other player they played with. So it was a lot of fun, and I think a lot of people that have seen it so far have enjoyed it. But just thought before I put these cards away, just a closer look at them, and we'll start with the Chicago Cubs. So Billy Williams was definitely overshadowed by Ernie Banks. My Pittsburgh Pirates, Roberto Clemente and Willie Stargell. They both really made a name for themselves in their own right. Star of the 71 World Series, Stargell star of the 79 World Series. Next one that we thought was one of maybe I don't want to say the most overlooked, but this guy was just such a stud in his own right. But unfortunately, or fortunately for him, he played with this guy, Henry Aaron. And just love to show off that card. Without a doubt, one of the best cards in my collection. But the two that we had shown on the show together, I don't know which way is better to show these. Eddie Matthews and Henry Aaron. And learned on the show that Henry Aaron was actually tied with, I believe he said Willie McCovey. Like, if you're watching this and I'm wrong, you can correct me on that. Another player we're going to show in the overshadowed era, but did over 500 home runs in your career and not be considered the best on your team in that era is truly amazing. Next one is a couple Brooklyn Dodgers. Jackie Robinson, Duke Snider. Not only was Duke Snider overshadowed by Jackie Robinson, but he had to compete against Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle in New York City for attention. Let's see what else I got here. Oh, two more of their cards from the same year. So in the podcast, there were a few of these players that I compared prices with, so I tried getting cards of theirs from the same year. We're not going to talk about any prices here. My Paul Molitor. Whoops. We'll get back to that because Robin Yount's missing. So Willie Mays, we thought, obviously one of the best players to ever play in baseball, actually overshadowed two guys. And one was Willie McCovey, and the other was Monty Irvin. And as I stated in the podcast, I think what might have hurt Monty Irvin was all the years that he played in the Negro Leagues before making it to major leagues. But I know both Willie McCovey and Willie Mays looked up to Monty Irvin quite a bit. Back to Paul Molitor, found the Robin Yount, or Yount, I always say that, not sure which way it's pronounced correctly. But Paul Molitor definitely played in the shadows of Robin Yount. And Robin played his whole career in the Brewers, where Molitor played for a couple other teams afterwards. Here's one of our few pitcher versus batter comparisons. And, we had mentioned if it wasn't for Sandy Koufax, we both felt, when I say we, I mean Mike and I, that Bob Gibson is probably the best pitcher of the 1960s if you eliminate Sandy Koufax. And Lou Brock just had a stellar career with the Cardinals. But I kind of feel that when you think of the Cardinals, you think of Bob Gibson a little bit before you think of Lou Brock. So I made this comparison that I thought Jim Palmer overshadowed Eddie Murray. And Mike made a good point that you could include Cal Ripken in here as well as overshadowing Eddie Murray, who 3,000 hits and 500 home runs clubs. To be overshadowed is really amazing. I brought up Bob Feller, who I think is one of the greatest Indians. And again, guys, these are all pretty much post-war. So when I say greatest pirate, I'm not including Honus Wagner, and I don't have any cards of Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth. And someone brought up, I forget, Sam Crawford and somebody else back in the day. So to be honest, I don't know as much about those guys, so I need to brush up a little bit. But we thought, or I thought, that Bob Feller overshadowed Bob Lemon and Larry Doby. And then Mike brought up, what about Early Wynn, who I didn't even think about him. So they had 3 Hall of Fame pitchers on those staffs. And again, Larry Doby literally came into the major leagues a few months after Jackie Robinson. And when they talk about players from the Negro Leagues breaking into the major leagues, you don't hear nearly as much about Larry Doby. Not only they share the same last name, both played for the Orioles for a while, and Frank Robinson was considered much higher up in the pedestal of Hall of Famers than Brooks Robinson. And as far as, maybe their Orioles career together, they were equal, but if you add in all the years that Frank played for the Reds, overshadows Brooks. This was another classic case here of a really great pitcher being overshadowed by another great pitcher. None of these guys that I'm saying that are overshadowed were fringe Hall of Famers. They're all legit Hall of Famers. And Drysdale just happened to be pitching at the peak of Koufax's career. And so great 1-2 punch there for the Dodgers. Here's another one where I thought one player kind of overshadowed 2 players on their team, and I'm not including Pete Rose. This was strictly based on Hall of Famers because you could put Pete Rose in this category. But now as Johnny Bench, when I think of the Cincinnati Reds, greatest players, this is who I think of. Also arguably one of the greatest catchers of all time. And he overshadowed, in my opinion, 2 other guys on that big Red Machine team that were Hall of Famers. And honestly, I think Joe Morgan overshadows Tony Perez as well. The New York Yankees, here's one of the players that is really well loved in the hobby. And he played with Yogi Berra. And Yogi Berra, as someone commented in the comments, is kind of like the Bill Russell of baseball with all the rings that he won. And, Yogi Berra, one of the greatest players of all time, but he played with one of the legends of all time. So definitely got overshadowed there. And then just 2 more. Carl Yastrzemski and Jim Rice, as far as overshadowing. And this is the one that I had mentioned in the podcast. I thought there was probably, to me anyways, the biggest discrepancy on star power is Stan Musial and Enos Slaughter. So, like we said in the podcast, if there's any other great combinations that you guys can think of, I had mentioned Gary Carter over Andre Dawson, and someone in the podcast comments said, what about those 2 over Tim Raines? I think someone mentioned Greg Maddux over John Smoltz. So the list goes on and on. These were just some of the ones we thought of. I know JT mentioned a bunch of Detroit Tigers that he thought contributed more. What was it, 67, 68 World Series? I think 68 than Al Kaline did. So it's just another great conversation piece. But really urge you guys, if these cards interested you at all, to go check out Mike's podcast, but I was on Bench Clear Media. And again, thank you, Mike, if you're watching this. Really had a great time doing it, and appreciate you including me on to talk some vintage Hall of Famers, which I think you and I could probably talk about all day long. So thanks again, everyone, for watching my video. As always, I appreciate it, and talk to y'all soon.